Many murders end without knowing the killer and remain unknown, and it is rare for a case to be closed without knowing the identity of the victim. But the murder that took place in room 1046 was very heinous and very mysterious, and the controversy still exists today about the identity of the killer and the victim. If you want to know more about this issue, watch the video to the end. At 7 in the morning, while the receptionist was busy arranging the hotel papers and records, the phone rang. The caller was the operator or asked her to check the phone of room note 1046 on the 10th floor because the phone was busy without being used. The employee asked the hotel host to go to the room and checking the phone. Randolph Probst went to the room reserved in the name of Mr. Roland T. Owen and knocked on the door several times. Roland replied, "I open the door and turn on the light." Randolph tried to open the door but it was locked and a do not disturb sign was placed on the doorknob. Randolph again asked Mr. Roland to open the door, but he did not answer this time, so he thought that the man might have been drunk and therefore could not open the door, so he only asked him loudly to hang up the phone and then went back to work. After an hour and a half, the operator repeated his call to the receptionist and told her that the phone was still busy, and this time she sent another host. Harold Beck went up to the room and knocked on the door, but no one answered him. The room was dark, and he saw Roland lying on the bed completely naked, so he thought he was drunk and didn't approach him, but put the phone on the floor back to its place and closed the door and then came back to tell his manager what happened. By 11 p.m. the receptionist received another call telling her that the phone in room 1046 was busy again. The employee got angry and called Probst quickly to solve this problem, and after he knocked on the door without answering, Probst decided to open the door with the private key. And here the gates of hell opened, and when he entered the room and turned on the light, Probst saw the room and its walls stained with blood. Even the ceiling of the room was falling from drops of blood, and when Probst looked into one of the corners, he found Roland there, completely naked, with his bloody head in his hands. With faltering steps, Probst ran to his manager and told him in a panic about what he saw in that room, who in turn called the police department. Minutes later, the investigators and the police arrived at the President Hotel and immediately headed to room 1046. Although he was severely hit in the head and stabbed in the chest, Roland was still alive, and before he was taken to the hospital, the investigator asked him what happened to him. He replied, "He slipped into the bathtub and was alone in the room." Roland soon died of his severe injuries upon arriving at the hospital, and the forensic report stated that the victim died as a result of a fracture of the skull and several stab wounds to the chest, one of which caused a hole in the lung, and that the victim was tortured and suffocated according to the bruises on his neck and his entire body, which appears to have happened 7 hours ago, that is, before the host entered the room, in addition to the traces of chains on his ankles and wrists, and it is likely that he was tied with a rope. As for the crime scene, it was very strange, as the room was completely empty despite the chaos and blood splattered in it. The investigators did not find any clothes or things belonging to the dead man, and according to the testimony of witnesses, Roland was wearing a black coat and did not carry a bag, and all that was with him is the hair comb, brush and toothpaste only, and the police did not find anything from the victim's belongings, even towels and clothes had disappeared. As for the evidence that the police found, it was a hairpin, a non-working cigarette and 4 small bloody fingerprints on the handle of the phone. The identity of the owner of those fingerprints was not known. All this made the investigators speculate that the killer was a woman and that Roland tried to call several times to ask for help, but his wounds prevented him from doing so. The crime took place on January 5, 1935 AD, and the investigators decided to open an investigation with the hotel staff and guests, and according to what an employee said, the reception stated that the dead man came to the hotel on January 2, at 1:30 p.m., wearing a black coat. He requested to reserve a room at the top of the hotel, and it was stipulated that the room be internal and not overlooking a street, and the room was booked in the name of Roland T. Owen from Los Angeles. The case became more mysterious after the authorities in Los Angeles denied knowing that there was a person with that name, so the police decided to display his picture in the media so that someone might recognize him. As for the testimony of the staff in the hotel, it was also very strange. Mary Sobek, the cleaning lady in the hotel, said that she came to clean the room the next day he booked the room, specifically on January 3rd, at 12 noon, she knocked on the door, and told him that she would clean the room, and he agreed. After her insistence, and she described the room as dark and the lights were off, except for a small lamp on the desk, Roland was getting dressed to get ready to go out, and before leaving he told her to leave the door open because there was a friend coming to visit him. After 4 hours, Mary came back to the room to put the clean towels and saw the door to the room open, and when I came in, I found Roland sleeping on his bed, dressed, and saw a piece of paper on the table that read, "Dawn, I'll be back in 15 minutes, wait for me." And the next day, in the morning of January 4th, while she was wandering between the rooms to change the room sheets and towels, and at exactly 10:30 she saw the door of the room locked from the outside, and thought that Roland had left, so she entered the room using the private key, and she was surprised by him sitting on a chair in a dark corner of the room. I apologized to him and started cleaning, while the phone rang and Roland answered the call. "No, Dawn, I don't want food, I am not hungry, I have had breakfast." Then he repeated her again, "I am not hungry." Then he ended the call and stood next to her and started asking her about her name, the nature of her work, the number of rooms she cleans, and the nature of the guests in the hotel. Mary was confused and felt that he interrogates her and she answers him briefly, then begins to complain about the prices of rooms in the hotel next door, and said, "It is too expensive to pay $5 per night." Mary finished cleaning and then left the room in a hurry, taking the dirty towels with her, and then came back later to put towels. The room was clean, and when I knocked on the door, I heard someone else in the room talking to Roland, and his voice was hoarse and refused to open the door for her, and he replied, "We don't need towels, there are enough of them." Mary was astonished by his speech, as she knew that the room did not have towels, but she left the place, thinking that the two men wanted to talk about something of their own and did not want anyone to hear it. Later that evening, the day before the murder, two visitors came to the hotel, one of whom was a woman named Jane Owen, who came to Kansas City to meet her boyfriend, and it was late and she decided to spend the night at the President Hotel, and I booked room 1048, to the right of the room in which the murder occurred the next day, and she said during her interrogation, that she heard the noise and the voices of men and women shouting and cursing in the next room, and she almost called the hotel service to complain, but she retracted it. The other visitor was a girl who asked the elevator operator Charles Blocker to take her to the 10th floor and told him that she was looking for a man who had promised to meet her in this hotel in room 1026. Then Blocker received a call asking him to go to work in the hall and return to the 10th floor after half an hour, so she called him the same girl and asked him to take her down to the hall, where she sat for about an hour, and there she met a man and talked to him, and then they went up together in the elevator to the 9th floor, and at 4 a.m. the girl left the hotel and then the man followed her after 15 minutes without taking any items or luggage, and no one recognized them. But Blocker said he had seen her in the hotel several times before and with more than one man. The photo and information published by the authorities in the newspapers about the case caused an uproar in Kansas City, Missouri, USA, and communications and reports poured into the police department. The most prominent of these reports was a call from the management of the Mohelibak Hotel, adjacent to the President Hotel, where his owners told the police that the dead man came to their hotel on January 1st and booked a room in the name of Eugene Cascott from Los Angeles, then he left the hotel after he objected to the room rate. And soon it became clear to the police that Eugene's name is just a fictitious name as before. Some witnesses said that they saw the mysterious man Roland in the St. Regis Hotel next door with an unidentified man. Also, a man named Robert Lane went to the police station and told the detective that he saw the same man in the photo, the dead Roland, on January 4th. He said that while he was driving his car back home at 11 p.m., a man wearing a light undershirt stopped him and asked him to take him to the taxi stand, and Lynn agreed to that, and the man got into the car with him. While doubts arose in Lynn's soul, so how can a man wear clothes light in this cold winter? Then this man was limping while walking while he was holding his arm, which was wounded, and when Lynn asked him about his condition, he replied, "I will kill that bastard tomorrow." Then he thanked the man and got down quickly and then got into a taxi. After 9 days, the police received a call from a wrestling coach named Tony Bernardi, and he claimed that a person who looked like the picture published in the newspapers had met him and asked him to play in wrestling arenas and claimed that his name was Cecil Werner. After controversy and a long futile search, the authorities decided to bury the body in March. While preparing for Roland's funeral, or as he was called, the Unknown, the funeral home received a phone call from an unknown person asking them to postpone the burial of the body until he sent a sum of money to arrange a proper funeral for Mr. Roland T. Owen, and when the funeral director asked him about his relationship with the dead, he told him that Roland was his sister's husband and that was his real name, and said that Roland had implicated himself, and that the police were looking into the wrong way of the case. This increased the confusion of the detectives, Frank Howland and Fred Green, and led them to believe that the unknown man was having an affair and that his wife had taken revenge on him. After that, the case was closed and tied up against an unknown person. A year after his burial and the closing of the case, a woman named Eleanor Ogletree claimed that the unknown man was Artemis Ogletree, her missing brother, whom she had not seen since he left his home in Birmingham, Alabama in April 1934 AD. She did not have his own pictures to prove the validity of her claim, and she did not explain why her brother was in that hotel and what the nature of his work was. And all she knows about him is that he traveled to Europe, and she claimed that a person named Jordan told her by phone that her brother had saved his life and that he had traveled to the Arab Republic of Egypt and married a girl from Cairo. Apparently her words do not coincide with the unknown man, especially that her brother's age at that time was 17 years, while the unknown man seemed much older, and with this, the investigators pretended to believe her after they were exhausted by searching for the murder of the mysterious man in room 1046. And the investigators kept opening the case from time to time so that they might find a thread that leads them to uncover the mystery surrounding the case, and because it is a mysterious case and refuses to fold its pages and become dusty. It returned to the spotlight again in 2012 when a man named John Horner, a librarian in Kansas City, spoke about receiving a call from an unknown person in 2004 AD, and the caller asked him about the latest developments in the case, which prompted Horner to be surprised and asked him why he was interested in a very old case, and that person replied, he found an old box in the house of a person who had died soon and it contained clippings from old newspapers talk about that crime and that he found something in the box. The newspapers talked about his disappearance from the room, and perhaps it was a basic evidence in the case. Then he hung up the phone and didn't call again, probably because of fear of being accused. The important thing is that by putting this video, I think that the most important questions that can be asked is why the victim tried to deny that he was assaulted and claimed that he slipped in the bathtub. And how did the killer get rid of the victim's belongings, towels, sheets, and tools of the crime? Is the attempt to make the murder look as if it was committed by a woman to take revenge on her traitorous lover just to mislead the investigators? For the killer was certainly not one person, but rather a number of people, and perhaps they were intelligence agents or members of the mafia who disguised themselves as hotel workers to carry out their crime, and the evidence is emptying the room of its contents without any of the hotel guards noticing them. As for the identity of the unknown victim and his false identity, it leads me to believe that that mysterious person was a spy or a man from the mafia gang. His real family is being harmed, while Don, that mysterious man, may have been the link between the victim and that gang or organization, and he trusted him blindly, with evidence that he left the room door open for him. And you, what do you think, dear viewer? Write your opinion in the comments. And so we have come to the end of the video. See you later. Peace and love.